Welcome into TFW Live, the best kept secret in fantasy football, where we keep that week one feeling going all year long. I'm Big Travy. I'm joined here by my best friends, Johnny and Austin. And of course, you, Whisper Nation, what's going on? We've got Slim Reaper in the chat. And what's up to him and everyone else that is going to be joining in later on today's episode? We are joined by a very special guest, Dave Kluge. You know him from Football Guys. And if you haven't followed him yet, he is a fantastic follow on Twitter at Dave Kluge. What is going on, Dave?
Not too much. Thank you guys so much for having me. The only time I've been on a show with you guys before was when you guys did that Potathon last offseason, which was a blast, but I'm excited to hop back on here for an actual full show. Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, it seems like each time we do this together, neither of us, you and me, are at 100%. Last time we did it, I didn't have a voice. I'm surprised you even remember. And then this time you got the shoulder thing going on. We wishing you all the best as you go into surgery next week, and we just appreciate you taking the time to do this. But let the people know where they can find you. Obviously on Twitter at Dave Kluge. What else you're working on?
Yeah, last year I was over here and over there and doing a million different things, but now it's really easy. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge. That's Kluge, and all of my content, written video, everything you can find at footballguys.com or youtube.com/now, making it nice and easy for everyone.
Absolutely. We love it. We love it. We also have his link tree, I think, in the description. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yep. So you guys can find them all there, Whisper Nation. But before we get into, kind of the show, I'm excited to talk about some of the stuff you've been tweeting out. You've been working on, Dave, with the panel here, of course. We're going to play a little deal or no deal. And so before we do, we've got to ask you to open the briefcase. So we wanted to ask you your favorite number so we can pick the right case here.
All right. Favorite number is 24. I was born on March 23rd, and I always hated picking 23 in sports because everyone was like, oh, Michael Jordan. So I just opted for 24, and it's stuck ever since.
There you go.
I thought it was like a Jeff Gordon thing or something. But... All right. So 24, she's excited about this trade. Let's see if you are. You're going to be receiving Debo Samuel and Joe Burrow. You'd be sending away Josh Allen and Deontay Johnson. So, Dave, obviously we don't know some of the point situations. Oh, actually, it's a super flex league. We know that much. So would you smash accept or you decline in this one?
I'd be declining this one. I think I want the Josh Allen and Deontay Johnson side. I am not all that high on Joe Burrow in Dynasty or just fantasy football in general. What we saw last year was great. He had a really nice finish to the season. But for somebody that doesn't rush the ball, he is going to need insane efficiency to crack that elite tier of fantasy quarterbacks. So, I like him, but I've got him more as a mid to back end QB1, where Josh Allen is the clear cut guy that's going to be a difference maker. He's going to give you a 5 to 10 point advantage almost every single week at that spot. And then Deontay and Debo, I think that they're kind of similar. You give the slight edge to Debo there, but I just think that the gap between Allen and Burrow is so much bigger.
I just want to ask really quick, because we were chopping this up a little bit before the show about Mike Tomlin and the Steelers' propensity to not re-sign wide receivers. We've seen a lot of them let him go. They picked up Juju again on that 1-year deal, but he's with the Chiefs now and he's still in his 20s, and they have a history of doing that. Do you see that trend continuing possibly with Deontay Johnson at a contract year? Or do you think they lock him up long term?
Absolutely. I think he is gone. I think that it was there was a reason that they went out and they drafted George Pickens this year. And I think that they just planned for the next guy to step in. And that's what they do. This team doesn't spend money at wide receiver. It is just, we see it all the time where we see these great wide receivers just move on from Pittsburgh. And I think this is the end of the road for Deontay Johnson. And I think Deontay Johnson is great, especially over the last couple of years, but I'm really interested to see how he does without Ben Roethlisberger. I can't help but feel like his production was really propped up by Ben Roethlisberger's waning arm strength, and they just had this connection that was just automatic with each other, and the targets were there, and he was just kind of an extension of the run game more than he was really playing a receiver. So it'll be interesting to see how he does if he has to step up as the number one guy and doesn't get those little 2-3 yard dump offs all game.
Yeah, that's a very interesting take. That's kind of the reason why I'm into Claypool this year, because especially if they move Claypool into the slot, I think there's something that could be said about, Pickett in college was really good at targeting the slot in the intermediate part of the field. So I think that could be really good for Claypool. Johnny, you think this trade kind of feels like you're sending away guys that like flashed that are probably not like, maybe a flash in the pan. I don't think that Burrow's not going to be good, but like in fantasy, what we saw, like kind of what Dave was saying, and you're sending away the guys that are good, that are solid, for guys that are like maybe one hit wonders at that peak, right?
Yeah, well, I'm also wondering is Dave, what's your perspective on, do you think, because if Josh Allen does end up actually we talk about it, but if he
He's
actually
not going to stop running.
yeah,
He thinks he's
I'm
going to
not saying stop running. I'm not saying stop running. I am saying he has averaged over he has always scored over 8 rushing touchdowns every single. That's a lot of fantasy points. So if you cut that in half, that's a lot of fantasy points that you are no longer getting, which would not put him as a QB1. Joe Burrow is way younger. Well, actually, no, he's not actually, right? That's actually
I think
false.
they're both 25, I believe.
They're both the same. Yeah. So, okay. So that the age won't matter much. So but here's the thing. Would you rather have Joe Burrow with all of his weapons, or would you rather have Josh Allen and his weapons moving forward?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, Joe Burrow has the massive advantage of throwing the ball to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And I think, I'll kind of push against what I said, taking the Josh Allen side. The one thing you can kind of hope for is that Joe Burrow does start to run a little bit more, because we saw it a lot in college, and we saw it even as a rookie where he was very nimble. Yeah. And then this year he was coming off of a gruesome knee injury. He had the brace on his leg and he wasn't really all that mobile. So you can project that maybe Joe Burrow starts to run the ball a little bit more, but I don't think that Josh Allen is suddenly going to change up his game. Like you said, he's still just 25 years old. When we see rushing quarterbacks start to tail down their rushing, that's usually in their early 30s. I mean, we just saw it this year with Russell Wilson at 32 years old. Cam did it all the way in his 30s. So I think you still got another 4 to 5 years at least where Josh Allen's going to be an elite rusher. The one last thing I'll say, kind of pushing against the take that I made once again, a lot of people are saying that the James Cook signing is a reason that we can expect Josh Allen to run the ball less, that they just invested, $250 million into Josh Allen. They want to make sure that he's healthy. So they're going to try to retrain him this year to start, hey, rather than just mowing through a defender, try to check down and throw the ball to James Cook. So it's possible. But I think what we've seen from the last few years from Josh Allen, this guy's just an elite talent. I think that he's going to be a top 3 quarterback just about every single year that he can stay healthy for the next 5 or 6 years.
I want to just add a little bit on to the Josh Allen support there, as well as one point on the Joe Burrow rushing. With Josh Allen, I agree, Johnny, that his rushing touchdowns could very well get cut in half. Last year he had 6, 8 before that, 9 the year before that. His rookie season he had 8. You could cut those in half. He still also hasn't broken 40 touchdown passes in a season. And to Dave's point, if we have James Cook coming in and we start developing a little more of a screen game in the arsenal, then that could be, 2, 3, 4 more touchdown passes that he picks up. So it's not going to be a huge drop off. There is the data to support what you're saying on Joe Burrow about his rushing uptick. He had 3 rushing touchdowns his rookie season, and he only played 10 games. He missed all that time. So he was on pace there, for 5, 6 touchdowns. We'll see if he gets more comfortable. And I think we could expect some of that with a healthy knee.
Yeah, I mean, Burrow ran quite a bit in college, actually. He was very efficient as a runner in college. So if we see him shed the knee brace and then run more, he's definitely a guy that could close some of the gap. I think, though, talking about a super flex league, I mean, Josh Allen is the first quarterback to repeat his QB1, I believe, over the last few seasons. So, that's something to, knock. That he's not just the best, he's QB1 right now. So that's something to keep in mind in Superflex leagues. All right, so we're going to work through some of the recent news really quickly before we get into some of what Dave's been working on and some of the intriguing stuff we've got over there. We've got some news out of 49ers camp here, or the rookie camp. Ty Davis-Price said that he intends to play between 220, 222 pounds this season. He's slimmed down to 211 for the combine, but this is a clear sign that San Francisco wants to truly beef, or they want true beef and physicality at Davis-Price at the running back spot. Austin, when we looked at this, we talked about this backfield as maybe Elijah Mitchell playing the Raheem Mostert role, and then maybe this Ty Davis-Price playing the Jeff Wilson role. Obviously, we're going to keep. How are you buying this, selling this? Is this big news?
I'm not buying anybody in the backfield of the 49ers for a high price, but I'm buying anybody I can get at a discount because they love to run the ball. They're so effective at it, but they got a lot of weapons and they use a lot of people. And I could give you a take, but I don't have a ton of weight behind it. I would play the numbers on this one, and I would be trying to pick up whoever I could get at a value price. That's my outlook as of May 19th.
I feel that. Moving on to the next piece of news, we have Philip Lindsay signing with the Indianapolis Colts. formerly of the Dolphins, obviously the Texans as well, and the Broncos, where he made kind of a name for himself. Johnny, we've got JT's replacement right here, right?
Oh, absolutely, dude. Give him the ball all day. He's been wanting to feed himself, dude.
But
He
I
wants
think-
to prove himself.
Jokes aside, do we have a question here? Because was Nyheim Hines really a true handcuff? And if he wasn't going to be, does Lindsay play some sort of role as a handcuff? Anybody you'd be looking at to cuff up JT with, Johnny?
No, I think this is a depth chart move, right? Because they lost Marlon Mack, and they like to have a plethora of running backs just in case. He might get a couple carries here or there, I would imagine, in games, just a couple of touches, but nothing much. Mostly just to hold the water of Jonathan Taylor to keep it, from being, contaminated by somebody else trying to get him sick. Yeah.
All right. Moving on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Speaking of Chris Godwin and speaking at OTAs, Todd Bowles said that the wide receiver Chris Godwin is better than where he was, but not where he needs to be. We don't put a timetable on it. Dave, are you just letting the summer play itself out, or do you have concerns about Chris Godwin to start the year this year?
Yeah, I mean, of course I'm concerned. That was a very late season ACL tear, but show me a single bad report from any offseason in May. They're always saying that he's, better or that he's ahead of schedule. I've never once
Best
seen a
shape of
report
his
in May
life.
saying, oh, we're terrified about how this guy's going to get along. So, yeah, I think you got to wait until, at least July before you start panicking on Godwin.
Sounds good. All right, moving on to the Miami Dolphins, talking about Raheem Mostert. Speaking at OTAs, Mike McDaniel, speaking of a May report, said of Raheem Mostert, his expectations are to play week 1 and not going to rush it. When he's ready, he'll be on the field. So similar to what Dave said, Austin, we started with the San Francisco backfield. We're going to end on basically San Francisco light over in Miami. How do you feel about Raheem Mostert, kind of the whole backfield as a whole?
I mean, as Johnny put it in our Dynasty League of Record, Raheem Mostert's got more points and more games played the last 2 seasons than Christian McCaffrey does. That's more of a it's not totally a fair point, but Raheem Mostert, when he plays, we know what he's capable of. It's just he doesn't play. And I don't know why that is going to change, but hell, it's a new season. We'll see what happens. I remember when Darren McFadden was perennially the injury guy, and then he had that 1 year where he came in and played more than 12.
Oh my gosh, you remember
and
that?
he was an actual piece. Remember that?
Man.
Is it likely? No. But could it?
Let's hope.
Anything is possible.
Kevin Garnett.
All right. Well, that kind of wraps up the news. It's getting a little slower now that we've gotten past the draft, obviously, but we'll get more of OTAs and camps coming in, so we'll get more news there. We're going to jump into some fantasy football talk here with our man, Dave. You've been doing great work on Twitter. I guess, it was really easy to pull content for this show just because some of the tweets you put out, they have gained great traction. A lot of it's just questions you have in your head. A lot of it's, research you go and do and you work on. Do you have a general theme for what you're trying to do on Twitter?
Yeah, I mean, so many people are scared to put takes out on Twitter. I mean, Twitter is just, it's toxic as all hell. I mean, you put stuff out there and people are just going to shred you for it. And you got to have thick skin, but I do it all the time. And, every time I'm writing an article, studying up for a show that I'm about to be on, filming a short video, whatever it is, I'm just taking little nuggets of information that I dig up and just throwing them in my tweet drafts. So my tweet drafts, I've got hundreds of little hard-hitting facts that I can just spit out at any time. And that's what I do. And then I just kind of wake up in the morning and, all right, which one do I want to fire off today? And I'll spit some tweets out there. But really, I mean, all it is, I'm just not scared of getting pushback on Twitter. And I think a lot of people are. And I just throw my takes out there and deal with it.
So you give yourself a night to sleep on it, essentially, or you arm yourself up with a bunch of ammo, and then you wake up and you're like, what looks good today? How am I feeling right now?
I mean, there's sometimes that tweets will sit my drafts for months at a time. And, I fired off an Amon St. Brown one this morning that was a little bit condescending, a little bit sarcastic. And that's just the mood I was in this morning when I woke up. Today, I'm going to fire it off today.
Yeah, I read that one.
Do you subcategorize them? You're like, oh, this is like a happy, sad, stressed.
I don't go that deep, but
he's got a mood ring on, and then that's how he checks the tweet out.
But it's just so many people spend all this time studying, and my thing is just trying to spread my content across as many platforms as I can. So if I'm doing a deep dive on Damien Harris, I'm going to write an article on Damien Harris. I'm going to record a short video on Damien Harris. I'm going to talk about Damien Harris on the next 2 or 3 shows that I guest on. I'm going to fire off some tweets about Damien Harris. And I feel like people are so quick to just write an article and then immediately move on to the next thing. And their content and their work isn't getting shared, where I just try to spread myself out across as many platforms and different channels as I can.
I mean, it makes so much sense. You're already in there working on it. You might as well just, because not everybody's going to read the article, but some people are going to read Twitter. Some people are going to listen. Try and get that information out to as many people as possible. That's also what we're trying to do over here by bringing you on the show. So let's get into it. You talked about Damien Harris. We're going to fire up a couple of those tweets here. One of them, you put 48.9% of Ramondre Stevenson's carries last season came in games where Damien Harris was sidelined with an injury. If you factor in week 17, where Harris was limited with a hamstring injury and only played 22% of the team's snaps, Stevenson's numbers jumped to 63.2%. That 63.2% of his usage in 41.7% of his games. That's what we're working with there. That's still, to you, says that that's still Harris's backfield right there. Factoring out those 5 games where Harris was injured and the 5 games where Stevenson was injured/scratched, that leaves us with 7 games where both backs were fully healthy. And you broke this down here. Stevenson had 49 carries, 262 yards and 1 touchdown, and Harris had 109 carries, 442 yards and 7 touchdowns. So I just want to give you a chance to kind of back up what you're saying here and some of the other stuff, because I haven't seen a lot of Damien Harris love out there on Twitter right now. So
right. And like we talked about, spreading myself thin, I just came out with a video yesterday morning that you can find on the Football Guys YouTube channel, which is a 6-minute video of me talking about Damien Harris. But I feel like we have just overcorrected. And I get it. You want to swing for upside when you're drafting running backs. And Damien Harris, he doesn't catch passes. Last year, he had an insane touchdown rate that is probably going to regress. Bill Belichick has this ridiculous history of just toying with us when it comes to running backs, but I don't think that it's that convoluted of a situation right now. I mean, we have seen now for this is for 2 straight years where it has been Damien Harris's backfield, and I was tweeting this out in summer of 2020 as well, that when you look at the overall numbers for Sony Michel and Damien Harris, it looked like it was a really confusing backfield. But when you look at the games where they were both fully healthy, which was a very small sample size, Damien Harris was very clearly the lead back. And we saw that last year as well. So when you look at Ramondre Stevenson's total numbers, you see 133 carries. You look at Damien Harris and he was at 204, 205, I believe. And it looks like, wow, this is probably, 60-40 split. But when you break it down and look at the games that they played where they were both healthy, this was very clearly Damien Harris's backfield. And I just think that we have overcorrected as a collective when he is getting drafted behind Cordero Patterson and Miles Sanders and some of these other guys. I took it a step further, and I looked over the last 5 years at running backs that have seen a minimum 200 carries and less than 25 targets, which is about what most people are projecting for Damien Harris. 18 players have hit that, and 16 of those 18 finished as a top 30 running back. Right now, Damien Harris is getting drafted as RB29, so we are drafting him at his absolute floor. If you think he's going to see 200 touches, he's going to be a top 30 running back. If you think he's going to see the goal line work that he saw last year, which was double-digit carries inside the 5-yard line, second most behind only Jonathan Taylor, he's going to see 12 or 15 touchdowns again. So there are reasons to be concerned, but I think that we have just vastly overcorrected. He should be getting drafted around the RB20 range, not the RB30 range.
And that's like exactly what you want to do, right? When it's like, go after these backfields that have, like most people don't want to touch them, or they're like, I don't want to deal with that mess because it looks from the outside in like a train wreck. But really, like you said, you dig in there, there's a lot of gems that you can uncover. And that's with a lot of teams. That's not just with New England.
I write down
Leonard Fournette.
Yeah.
I write down in my little fantasy football diary at the end of every season some takeaways that I picked up. And I think 4 years ago, one note that I included in there was, if you're drafting a head of a committee, try to avoid one of those guys in like rounds 2 or 3, because if it's a real committee and there's some real competition behind them, that to me was too expensive of a price to go after a lead guy who's in a real committee. But if you can get a lead guy in a committee down there in rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, as it goes down, like that's a great gamble to pick up on. And that's where I see Damien Harris. Yes, there's going to be a lot of running backs. Yes, he's not going to be in all the time when you want him to be there, but he is going to be that lead dog. He is going to get you a lot of points, and he's probably going to be more reliable than you might be giving him credit for right now when you boil it all the way down.
He feels like one of those guys, like as you avoid the dead zone and you smash wide receiver, then you scoop back up on a Damian Harris. You know, you get a guy like that who can like really solidify your RB2 position.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good strategy to go with. We're going to stick with running backs here, but we're going to move on to a tweet that Dave had that probably is going to hurt a lot of our feelings here, but it's facts. You know, we have to talk about this stuff. And so the last running back over the age of 26, says Dave, to have a top 5 fantasy football finish was LaShawn McCoy in 2016. Shout out to Shady there. You also followed this up saying notable running backs who will be over the age of 26 for the 2022 season: Alvin Kamara, Leonard Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott, Austin Eckler, Dalvin Cook, James Conner, Nick Chubb, Aaron Jones, and Derrick Henry. So this question is for everyone. We'll start with you, Johnny. Of the 26-year-olds listed, who, in your opinion, has the best shot to join LaShawn McCoy and be the first one since 2016?
I would say if I'm picking, I would lay, and I had to like put 1 million rupees on this, it would be Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb for sure. My boy, got to go down with the
You've
ship.
been on big Nick Chubb top 5 for multiple.
And eventually I'm going to be right. So that's what I said. If I had to put down 1 million rupees, dude, I would be putting it on Nick Chubb.
Rupees.
Love it.
Say like Willem Dafoe.
Yeah.
Shout out Slumdog Millionaire. Fantastic. But Dave, I'll kick it to you now. You can answer neither because obviously this is your tweet and the content you put out. But who do you think's got the best shot to join LaShawn McCoy?
So this is one of those tweets that I threw out there that is just a fish hook, just, looking for people. I don't think that none of these guys are going to finish as top 5. I think that this is the year that the trend is finally bucked, but I just kind of threw it out there just to see how people would react to it. And wouldn't you know, everybody kind of went crazy over it. But I think the big thing is we just saw this lull for almost 10 years where there were like no really good running backs coming into the league. And then 2018, that draft completely changed it when we saw McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook and all of these just stud running backs come in the league. So I think that, and you can go back to 2016 when Zeke came into the league as well. So I think that now it's a little bit different because these running backs are very good running backs. And we just haven't really had good running backs in a long time. So I'm going to put my chips on Leonard Fournette. This guy led all running backs in targets last year. He is a 3-down back on arguably the most explosive offense in the league, highest pace of play. He gets a ton of checkdowns. He gets goal line touches. So I'm going to go with Leonard Fournette.
I got to throw in there with Leonard Fournette anytime someone's bringing him up in a positive fashion. I'm sure you've seen the video of him giggling when he gets hit. Have you seen that one, Dave?
No,
you haven't seen that? They might.
Guys that accepts content.
Yeah.
You will find it. You just type Leonard Fournette laughing hit, and you will find him being mic'd up and just different series of 2-3 linebackers just piling on him hitting that truck stick and then going every time. He's like the Hines Ward at the running back position. His neural transmitters up here, the reward and pain receptors are a little bit unusual comparatively speaking. And this dude just loves contact. When I saw this, I was like, you have to pull him off the field. He loves to hit and like might not be good for his body, but it's great for his fantasy production.
He's one of those guys that has been so good since he came into the league and just perennially underrated. I mean, even in Jacksonville, this guy was pumping out great seasons on a terrible team. And I don't understand why people have been sleeping on him for years now in Tampa Bay, but I've got him as my RB3 in PPR leagues this year. I'm taking him.
Oh, wow.
And the nice thing is I don't have to draft him that early, but that's where I'm expecting him to get to finish the season is as a top 3 running back.
I mean, if he stays healthy, I don't think you just got to stay healthy, right?
Yeah.
That's the big thing. I mean, that was the whole reason why we didn't get it last year out of him because he was
on
a tear.
Before we jump over that one, because we were talking about those great running backs that did come in. Saquon was kind of in the middle of that with the Ezekiel Elliott and the Leonard Fournette. And like the last time we saw a halfback taken in the top 5. Do you have any takes on Saquon Barkley here for our boy Jersey J?
Yeah, I mean, he's another guy that I have just been drafting as much as I can right now. I don't know if you guys do a lot of underdog drafts, but right now it seems like running back values are broken. Like we are getting RB1s in the 3rd and 4th round. They say, avoid the running back dead zone. But for some reason, I think that, again, like I was talking about earlier, overcorrecting, that's something that I think that we do a lot of this time of year. And right now, I mean, I just shared a picture yesterday where I left with Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, and Alvin Kamara as my 3 running backs. And I took them in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round. I mean, Barkley is just sliding into the 3rd round right now, and it makes no sense to me. Saw a little drop in efficiency last year, but his passing game usage was through the roof. I mean, this guy was top 10 in like every single passing number that you can look at. So I'm not too concerned. I mean, it was his first year coming back off of an ACL. We see historically year 2 after the ACL is when guys look better. And the thing that everybody seems to forget, it feels like Saquon Barkley's been in the league for a decade. No, he's still just 25 years old. I mean, this guy is young.
Yeah.
He's still got a long career ahead of him. So I'm
not a
all
lot
in
of
on
tread.
Saquon Barkley.
Not a lot of tread on the tires.
He's not in
Yep.
Dave's deadly 26-year-old club here. He missed the mark. So, well, it's interesting you bring up the dead zone. You bring up this influx of 26-year-old talented running backs. Philosophically, I think we could see something, in fantasy football where maybe the dead zone doesn't exist like it used to. Like not just these guys, but also every first rounder last year basically got hurt outside of Jonathan Taylor. If you're looking at maybe Eckler. And so I just wonder if we're going to prioritize maybe wide receivers a little bit earlier, push the running backs down a little bit. And then that's just going to create where actually you got to pick one of these studs in that zone anyways. And I think we're going to see, I'm with you on the rebound of the 26-year-old. That might be just because I traded for Derrick Henry with Austin in Dynasty, so I really want to see him continue to do that. But yeah, that's.
But it seems like the dead zone used to be guys that like maybe they'll be the starter, maybe they're the pass catching back in a committee, and now the dead zone, like you said, because all these wide receivers are getting pushed up the board. Now in the dead zone, you can get James Conner, Leonard Fournette, Aaron Jones, Ezekiel Elliott, guys that are the proven 3-horse backs on their team. So it's just I don't know if the dead zone really exists right now. This is a different year.
Yeah, it's just crazy. I'm excited to see where it settles in because, like you said, we're overcorrecting now in May. Obviously, we'll have training camp news, and then we'll get the ADP spikes and see what happens in July and August. All right, the next tweet we had from Dave, which was another great one, we actually ended up making it into a poll of sorts. Dave tweets out here, the top 4 picks in fantasy football, regardless of order, should be Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp. Then things get weird. Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, ? Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette, Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase. Who are you taking? Was Dave's question here. We posted this question basically to Whisper Nation in a couple different ways on Twitter and Instagram. So, Johnny, let's check the results here of Twitter. We had Austin Eckler, 33% was the winner of our Twitter poll there. And then on Instagram, Derrick Henry came in.
Ooh.
So, Derrick Henry
Yeah.
it
was wild.
He's just got a huge IG presence or something, I guess.
We have a lot of Tennessee Titans fans.
There we go.
Or Big Travy. The truth is, Big Travy went to all
voted
the
a bunch of
Yeah,
times.
he went to everyone that he worked with and was like, vote Derrick Henry right now.
Right. So, Dave, I wanted to ask you, first of all, you tweeted this out, but you didn't really give us your answer. So where do you fall right now? All these guys are gone. You got to pick. You're on the clock now.
Jamar Chase for me. I mean, Jamar Chase just had the most absurd rookie season we've seen since Randy Moss. It's Jamar Chase for me easily. And like I said, I mean, Leonard Fournette is my RB3 right now. And right now he's getting drafted as the RB14, which is kind of ludicrous. Like I don't know why his ADP is where it is. So if he creeps up and he gets an ADP somewhere in the mid-first round, I might be willing to draft him as early as 5, but I don't have to right now. So playing ADP a little bit to my advantage, Jamar Chase is a guy that I'm taking at 5 every single time.
We were talking about Chase, I believe, on Monday, right? A little bit, Chase and T. Higgins. And I just wanted to ask you, Dave, if you think, because T. Higgins has a shot to be like the more consistent player, if you think Chase lived a little bit too much on the big play, and if that concerns you at all in kind of taking him, or you just, we're chasing Chase. We love it.
Yeah, I actually tweeted about this not too long ago. It was something absurd. It was like 60%. I can't remember the exact number, but I want to say it was 60% of Jamar Chase's fantasy production came on 7 plays. I mean, this guy was just a big play waiting to happen last year. He had, I believe it was 6 touchdowns, over 50 yards. I mean, it was just insane how much this guy relied on big plays. And when you look at when towards the end of the season and through the playoffs, when he and T. Higgins were both healthy, T. Higgins was actually getting more usage. He had a higher target share than Jamar Chase did. Now, I want to chalk some of that up to defenses adjusting and starting to put a little bit more pressure on Chase. I'm not sitting here trying to dog Chase at all. I mean, this guy's an otherworldly talent. But to your point, I think T. Higgins is a screaming value, and he's another guy that I'm super bullish on. I've got him as my wide receiver 8 right now. And I mean, I think that wide receiver 1 being the overall wide receiver 1 is just as much in his range of outcomes as it is in Jamar Chase's.
I think it's just a smash spot. So now I'm going to tie this all back. We're going to circle back to the Joe Burrow take at the top. If we think that it's good for the geese, it's got to be good for the gander. So, right, Joe Burrow, if we think both of these guys can finish, I don't think top 12 is out of the question for both guys. And then you're talking about maybe a case for both top 5. I mean, I don't know if both of them could be top 5. But then we've got to like Joe Burrow. And what we've seen in statues, even if they don't run, Brady, Stafford, they just have to have guys that they can sling it to all the time. Do we think maybe the schedule, or do we think it's possible here for Burrow?
It is possible for Burrow. So Burrow is in that Burrow and Brady. I have them in their own tier right beneath the rushing quarterbacks. It's not that they can't be the quarterback 1 overall. They certainly can. But in order for them to do that, they're going to need to see bumps in efficiency and bumps in volume. I mean, the only way with their lack of rushing upside that they're going to be able to finish as the QB1 is if they throw 700 times and they have insane touchdown numbers. Now, I tweeted this out again recently. This was a little study that I was just doing on how valuable it is to be a rushing quarterback. Jalen Hurts last year, the amount of points that he generated just from his rushing alone is equal to 27 touchdown passes from 25 yards out. So a quarterback could throw 27 25-yard touchdowns, and it still wouldn't eclipse what Jalen Hurts is able to do on the ground. So the advantage that you get from a quarterback that rushes the ball is just such a game changer. So it's not that these guys that pass first can't have elite seasons. It's just that you're so much better off betting on the guys that are going to run the ball.
Jalen Hurts was that number 1 overall quarterback for several weeks and finished the season with 16 passing touchdowns. That's it. 16. He didn't really miss any time.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
10 rushing touchdowns. Sanders had 0. I mean, that's like the kind of Philadelphia Eagles thing we're working with, are just like the rushing quarterback. And Josh Allen, like we talked about Josh Allen at the top, the amount of rushing touchdowns, I think is just a buoy, a buoy as well.
Before we move on, can we get, I want to jump over to Scott's point here. How is Henry not the number 1? You are all crazy. He's the only offensive weapon. Love you, Scott. Make sure you drink your juice and eat your Jell-O, all of it. But any takes on this? How do you feeling about Derrick Henry coming in?
Man, 29 years old, coming off an injury, looking at the workload that he has had throughout his career, there are just so many red flags there. And it's not that he can't be the number 1 overall guy. I mean, if he finished the season averaging 28 points a game, it wouldn't surprise me one bit. But if he goes out and doesn't do that great this year, it also wouldn't surprise me. Last year, we saw a completely different style of usage for Derrick Henry, where he was suddenly involved in the passing game. After not seeing that at all throughout his career, then all of a sudden he's a pass-catching machine. But when you look at the efficiency numbers from last year, his yards after contact per attempt, his broken tackle rate, his juke rate, just about every single thing that Derrick Henry is known for, he hit career lows in efficiency last year. So I am very worried. We were kind of joking about me being past my age apex as my shoulders falling apart. Well, I'm also worried that Derrick Henry is pretty far past his age curve. So it wouldn't surprise me if he has a great season, but there are just so many safer options out there that you can take at the top of the first round.
Well, yeah, and how much of his yards per carry and yards, all those advanced metrics come off because of the plate in his foot. He's got to at least lose some drift with that, right? I mean,
and he didn't look good in the playoffs. I mean, it was probably
well, yeah.
back
well, I'm not like the first game,
that was
right, but he looked bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder though, like me and Austin have had conversations about this too, but it's like with Henry, are we trying to fit him, a square peg into a circle hole with all these kind of things where like he's continuously shocked us each and every time. So like, why not? Like to me, like we were taking Zeke, not at number 1 overall, but in the top 6 or something last year under the same kind of premise that he was the whole main vein of his offense. And are you more confident in Henry or Zeke to continue to do kind of what they're doing? And, age difference is a thing, of course, but I just, he's a special dude. And I think that's something to keep in mind as well.
Who do you like,
So
Zeke
one other
or?
thing I'll point out though, is the Tennessee rushing as a team, they didn't see a dip in rushing of production when Derrick Henry went out. I mean, whether it was Adrian Peterson, Jeremy McNichols, Donta Foreman, they had almost identical Dontrell Hilliard, they had almost identical rushing production without Derrick Henry. So he's a great player, but so much of what he does has to be chalked up to scheme as well. So I'm concerned that now with him being as old as he is, there might be a little bit more of a committee approach going forward.
Here's what's the interesting part about that's kind of not being talked about from the perspective of AJ Brown leaving. And it's just how much, I mean, teams aren't going to be necessarily afraid of Treylon Burks until he really proves hey, you need to be afraid of me and game plan for me. I don't think with the receiving core that they have, I love Bobby Trees. We'll see how he does coming back from, but he's also getting up there as well in age. So it's like this receiving core. I mean, if teams really decide to stack the box and really load it, I know that we haven't seen that in the past really affect Derrick Henry. They'll usually end up hurting you that way. But again, if you're talking about what Dave, going along with Dave's stuff about the efficiency, the mileage on him as he gets older, you could end up seeing that start to really affect him and get at this team and it not work out just as planned from the Tennessee's offensive side of the ball.
So back to this top four, this big four. I wanted to ask Johnny and Austin, and we'll start with Austin here. If you would change any of that big four and kind of sneak somebody else in, and then kind of who, we asked Dave who they're taking at 5. Like Austin, I'll start with you. Who you got at that 5 spot?
I think for me, I am going to go Derrick Henry on this one because he has, for me, what is the clearest role. He could break down. His efficiency could fall through. But I think they're going to test that. And I'm down to be a part of that test run and to see if they can break King Henry or not. We were saying the same thing about Derrick Henry start of last year. Coming in, people were like, nope, he's going to take a slip. He's going to fall. And ultimately he got hurt, but he still finished as he's still a top 20 running back, right? He missed like half the season. He was just absolutely crushing it. He is special. He's the biggest running back in the NFL by quite a bit. And he has a team offense that pretty much runs on his shoulders. That might be a mistake. I think it probably is, but I think they're going to go for it and see what they got. And that means fantasy points for me until he is actually out of the lineup. So we'll have to see that happen, but I think he's going to get the best shot to try to be that number 1 dude.
Love Z's stat here. He says Henry saw the highest percentage of 8-man boxes in his entire career in 2021. Johnny, do you agree with Austin here at Derrick Henry, or who would be your 5th here?
Yeah, I think I would actually go Derrick Henry, which listen, it's kind of a change in what I traditionally believe as a fantasy football player, right? Like I don't necessarily like to set myself up for what could end up being an inevitable downfall. And actually, this could be why it could be my downfall. But this is what I would say. Derrick Henry always gets you off to such a great start in fantasy football. And the thing that I do like about Derrick Henry's situation, we just spent a while talking about it, is we know exactly what they're going to do if he goes down. So if you know that, then you can go and get the appropriate hand. Like Donta Foreman was a very good piece for a lot of players if you picked him up off waivers once Derrick Henry went down. If you were able to handcuff the right handcuff, right? Well, now we should know that. They kind of spoke to us in the draft. We also have retained McNichols. So I am okay taking Derrick Henry because I do know the certainty of what's behind him. Unlike, in past years with like CMC and things like that, we might not have known exactly who the handcuff was going to be. But in most cases, it ends up panning out if they end up going down and you grab that end up like Mike Davis, for example.
You don't think it'd be Madison for Dalvin Cook right here? You don't see that as a clear 1-1?
No, I do. I do. Well, I do. Well, and here's the thing.
And I
do think Ty is interesting. And because Madison is on the last year of his contract, I did think about putting Cook there at number 5 and he's also starting to catch more passes reportedly out of camp. So that is a little interesting there. But Derrick Henry is just so good. And with them getting rid of A.J. Brown, that just screams to me that they want to run the ball and even more if they can.
They're the number 1 team in the AFC coming in. They're going to try. They're not in a rebuilding year, even though it kind of seems like they are. I think they're going to try to win some games. I don't know if they're going to have what it takes, but if I'm coming in as the former number 1 seed in the AFC, I'm not rolling over to start it off.
I think he's like the most surefire of all the guys. If we bring that back up, like if we're really looking at it, like And of course, the age is the bigger question, but at least we know out of everybody what's going to happen. We think, if
they're all good here too.
Yeah, but like obviously, as Dave said, that's where it gets weird because there's so many decisions to be made here.
I bet Joe Mixon finishes with the most points of all these other guys, though.
I was actually going to say no love for our guy Joe
it.
Mixon here. I love.
I'm still taking Henry, but I bet you that Joe Mixon finishes with more points between Eckler, Henry, Cook, Fournette. By the time it's all done.
Joe Mixon is still getting drafted at the 1-2 turn. Like that's where he was getting drafted last year. The guy puts up a top 5 season, and it's like, oh, finally people are going to put some respect on his name. Nope, still sliding in draft.
I mean, it was hard to even get him.
August.
It was hard to even get him to that spot because people were burnt by him the previous year, and so there was like, yeah, I'm with you.
All right, so we're moving on here. Dave put a tweet out about DeAndre Hopkins. He said, "I thought I was going to be out on DeAndre Hopkins this year, but y'all are letting him fall into the 6th and 7th round of best ball leagues, and I can't help myself." Dave, I wanted to ask you, with Hopkins going in the 5th round in some 12-team leagues and managed leagues too, like in year-long redraft, is this take specific to only best ball for you, or do you find yourself maybe seeing him as somebody you'd target in redraft as well?
Yeah, I think 5th round might be a little bit rich, but 6th or 7th round is where I'm pretty comfortable pulling the trigger on him. I think what happened is a lot of people spent very similar draft capital on Michael Thomas last year and got burned, and now they want nothing to do with DeAndre Hopkins here. But, at the end of the day, I just think he's going to step into the wide receiver 1 role. And when you look at last year, there were some concerns. His target share was down a little bit. His touchdown rate really, really supported his fantasy production. But I'm not concerned that he is just falling off this age cliff like so many people make it out to be. Last year was the first year that we ever really saw him miss time with an injury. This dude is as tough as they come. I expect him to come back this year from the injury, looking just like his old former self. So I'm not really concerned at all. He's a guy that realistically, when he's playing, still has potential to be a top 5 receiver. And if you can get that late in the draft, I'm all in, even if he's going to be suspended for a bit.
Interesting correlation with Michael Thomas. Obviously the big difference being that this is a suspension, no injury really to worry about. Obviously Hopkins got a little bit banged up last year. That could be a big, cause of concern as to why he wasn't seeing the target volume that we saw. He was relying on touchdowns, mainly playing through some of the injury there.
Dude, and just on that tough as nails point, when he did get hurt initially in the season, I think it was a quad injury, and he was lobbying to get back in the game, and he won that conversation. He went back in the game after suffering a real quad injury. And to me, like, that wasn't the smartest thing looking back, but it does point to how tough and dedicated DeAndre Hopkins is. And as Dave pointed out, up until last season, like, this dude doesn't miss any time. It doesn't matter who's been throwing him the ball. This dude is that dude. Like, he's tough as nails.
He didn't win any conversation. He just went in.
He didn't have a conversation.
Yeah,
there was no conversation.
That was the truth. That's what Coach Cliff Kingsbury said. He was like, he's like, because they asked him, and he's like, Hopkins just kept going in and out of the game. I didn't know when he was going to go in the game or what his status was. So that's why it kind of messed up my game plan and what I was calling. Here's my concern, honestly, about Hopkins, and kind of reading some tea leaves. Hopkins is on about to be a free agent pretty soon. We don't have him locked up for too much longer. He is getting a little bit older, right? You have Hollywood coming in. Hollywood is going to be Kyler's number 1 weapon. He will go to him very often, very early, and they are going to build on that, right? My issue with taking usually, and when I draft a wide receiver, and because of either an injury or a suspension, and you're kind of banking on that second half production, if you're doing that, the best opportunity or the best chance and route is most likely right before they come back. You trade that person away while the hype is coming. Oh, he's only got 2 weeks left, because more oftentimes than not, it does not actually pan out the way you think it's going to when they come back, and their value actually declines. And I just say that specifically for this reason, because when he comes back, it isn't like it used to be, because when he comes back, Hollywood is not Christian Kirk. Okay. Hollywood is AJ Brown. Those guys are going to be holding Hollywood's jockstrap at the end of the day while he's scoring all these touchdowns and getting all these balls thrown his way. So I do think
AJ Green.
Or yeah, what did I say?
AJ Brown.
Oh yeah, sorry.
we
I
knew.
just got
We
AJ
knew.
Brown on the mind. I
was like,
wish AJ Brown too.
I
That
was
would
like,
be
whoa, we're
but-
feeling good
yeah,
about Hollywood.
yeah,
Yeah. Let's
no
go Cards.
but AJ Green, thank you. But so I just don't know because when Hopkins was his solo self, he was getting like 32% of the team's target share, and he's not going to get that if you've got Hollywood on this team. If Moore steps up and gets even a little bit more target market share than what he saw last year, I believe he only saw like 8%. He should, as a early draft or early round draft pick, should increase that amount of targets as well. So I do think I have some concern, although I like you said, his value isn't where you have to take him right now in drafts isn't so terrible that you're like, oh, I'm really risking a high pick here. But I do think that there is a little bit of caution there.
I can see that for sure. We've got some caution in the chat for Darren Waller. Jersey J saying, oh, big question. How low is Darren Waller's ADP? Just looked it up on 4for4. That's tight end premium. He's going in the 3rd round, 4th round in some other leagues as well. How much does it change with the new wideout lineup? Like, is Waller a streamer now? Dave, this is an interesting question I'll pitch to you about Vegas, because not only do we have the new coaching staff, which kind of could excite you if you're talking about McDaniels and tight ends. That could kind of get you going a little bit. But then you have Devontae Adams coming in, and not to mention Hunter Renfrow, who blossomed last year into a huge target getter for this offense. So, and plus the targets that have been gone to Baxton and McDaniels' offense as well. Where are you at on Waller? Do you think that, that he can have a bounce back year here?
I'm so off Waller at his current ADP because he's still getting drafted as the 4th tight end off the board. And this is a year where I think that there are actually, and we kind of trick ourselves into this every single year, don't we? Thinking like this is the year that tight ends are deep, but it feels like they actually are. I'll go back to the Cardinals. I mean, Zach Ertz was a monster after he got traded to Arizona last year, and you can draft him 5 rounds after Darren Waller is going. Dalton Schultz, who now is free of Amari Cooper and playing in Dallas, he could see 120, 130 targets, and he is getting drafted well after Darren Waller. Cole Kmet is a guy that I've really been beating the drum for. I think he's going to step into 120 to 125 targets, and you can get him as the 18th tight end off the board. So I think people are still kind of focused on last year when they think that Waller is in that very clear-cut elite tier of tight ends, but I'm not really seeing him there. I see him more in the Hawkinson Goddard tier now. I think that there's a big drop-off after you get past Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts. Those are the 3 difference makers. After that, everybody, you're pretty much banking on a weekly touchdown for them to live up to their production or live up to their value.
Love it, love it. And Jersey J saying he loves the take as well. All right, moving on here, and it wouldn't be a TFW show if Johnny didn't sneak DeAndre Swift into the show notes somehow.
Yeah, baby.
So we'll put it up here. Dave Kluge talking about our guy, DeAndre Swift. Prior to his injury last year, DeAndre Swift was the RB5 in fantasy football and led all running backs in targets. 4for4 ADP has him at 204 and his RB number 9. Johnny, you got to talk to Dave about your boy DeAndre here.
Yeah, Dave, I just, I'm like the residential DeAndre Swift truther on this show. So I think it only right, being that you had this tweet. How high do you think you could reasonably, because people might not take my word for it on this show because they might think I'm biased a little bit. How high would you take DeAndre Swift this year? Like, how high do you think would be before you're reaching for your guy, as we like to say here?
Again, so I do rankings a little bit differently. As the season goes on, I'll tweak my rankings a little bit to try to reflect ADP. But right now, I'm trying to plant flags with my rankings and trying to figure out where I think these guys are going to finish. I already talked about one of my spicier rankings with it, which is Leonard Fournette as RB3, but my RB4 is DeAndre Swift. I mean, I am all in on this guy.
Baby.
I think he's just a phenomenal talent. The offense is going to run through him. The one thing that I'm a little bit concerned about, though, and people seem to forget about this or just don't want to talk about it, he was awful as a rusher last year. Like, not just
we just don't talk about it. Just don't talk about it.
Awful as a rusher. But what this guy can do.
Getting canceled by Johnny over here, Dave.
Hey, but listen, I still got the guy as my 4th running back off the board. I mean, I love his talent. What he can do in the passing game is absolutely insane. There aren't a lot of guys that can take a ball to the house from anywhere on the field. I mean, when you're looking at that, it's Alvin Kamara, DeAndre Swift, Aaron Jones. I mean, it's a pretty short list of guys that are able to do that. I'm just enamored with DeAndre Swift when I watch this guy on the field. So he is my 4th running back off the board. And one of my favorite things, you hear about hero running back all the time, where you draft your running back in the first round, and then you go out and you get all your wide receivers. My favorite move this year has been taking one of those top 3 receivers, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase. I take one of those guys in the first round. Then I get DeAndre Swift in the second round, which is a top 5 running back value for me. And then I go with my receivers after. So it's kind of like, I feel like I'm getting like a hero wide receiver and a hero running back, and then still getting my wide receiver depth after the fact. I don't understand why DeAndre Swift is slipping into the second round. He's a phenomenal value. And yeah, I can't say enough good things about him.
Yeah, I mean,
neither can I.
Yeah, he's definitely elite pass catcher, but the rushing is a concern. And Jamal Williams still under contract, somebody that they're going to continue to grind with. But again, in fantasy, like it really doesn't matter if you're established in that receiving role. Any concern with you with a full slate, Dave, of the if the Lions are fully healthy? Would that take away from kind of the ceiling that Swift has in the receiving game? Like if Hawkinson's really dealing, maybe halfway through the year to get Jamison Williams into the lineup, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown established himself as well. Any of the new additions too in free agency?
Not especially, because with Jared Goff as the quarterback, those check down passes are still going to be there. I mean, that's all he's done since he came into the league, or just they didn't have a running back. Well, they had Todd Gurley catching him for a little bit, but I mean, that's pretty much what Robert Woods did. I mean, you can almost compare DeAndre Swift to Robert Woods in the roles that they play in this offense. So as much as I love the long-term outlook for what the Detroit Lions could be once they get a very capable quarterback, right now there are still going to be plenty of checkdowns heading DeAndre Swift's way. I'm expecting 5 to 6 targets per game.
Love it. All right, we'll move on to our final topic here with Dave, and this one was a really good one. I'm excited to end the show with it. I kind of feel like from this tweet, Dave, like we can build all of the burning questions for 2022's like outlook of the fantasy season here. And what you have here are the most polarizing players with wide deviations among Football Guys rankers. You can follow Football Guys on Twitter. You can get them at footballguys.com. And so we'll list these guys off here. You got Zach Wilson, QB 11 to QB 29. That's where he's being ranked in between there. Matt Ryan, QB 13 to 29. Leonard Fournette, RB3 to RB16. Antonio Gibson, RB9 to RB29. Wow, wide range there. Damian, you're the one that's probably pushing that up so much, huh? Yep. Damian Harris, RB19 to RB44. Debo Samuel, wide receiver 4 to wide receiver 24. DK Metcalf, wide receiver 11 to wide receiver 33. Cortland Sutton, wide receiver 10 to wide receiver 38.
I love this game.
This is amazing. I mean, there's just so many juicy ones here. So, Austin, you spoke up here. Which of these players is the most polarizing in your opinion? And just speak on that a little bit.
Oh my God, I've got chills all the way up my neck right now, dude. Like,
show us, or it didn't happen.
I don't lie, dude. I don't lie, man. I show you, but
we believe.
To me, the most polarizing on here, Debo Samuel. I can't get away from Debo because he was so elite. And Dave, I think I was perusing your Twitter, and I think you had I'm going to give you credit for it, even if it wasn't you, but you had a great stat up there about Debo Samuel in the first 8 or 9 games, and then 9 beyond after that, where his role on the offense dramatically shifted. He wasn't a running back in those first 2 months of football, and then he had some meaningful shares at the halfback position in the second half of the season, but his overall impact was like right around that 21% mark. His involvement
within 1 point of each other in those splits.
So it didn't really matter. But Debo Samuel has done so much in his short time in the NFL. He's been a highly touted prospect. He's been a bust. He's been a savior. He's been hurt. He's been healthy. He's been off the 49ers. Now he's back with San Francisco. He's just all over the place. He's sexy as hell. He riles it up. I don't know what I'm going to get, and I freaking love it. So I'm not going to draft him, but I love watching everybody else ride the train. So that's where I'm going to pick.
Where do you land, Dave, on the in-between here? Wide receiver 4 or wide receiver 24?
So when it comes to Debo, I'm smack dab in the middle. He is my wide receiver 14. And I was last offseason, I was the Debo guy. Like, I was the biggest proponent for Debo Samuel out there. I was the only person in the Fantasy Pros contest, over 200 rankers. I was the only person that had Debo Samuel ahead of Brandon Ayuk. And I fought that battle all season, all off season long. And I mean, I think that Debo Samuel is just an incredible talent. And last year he was getting drafted outside of wide receiver 30, which I thought was ludicrous. But I think that we got a little bit overexcited now when we're pushing him up into the top 4, top 5, top 6. He is a great player, but last year he was so insanely efficient. Like he's not going to see another 8 touchdowns on the ground. That's just not going to happen. Also,
that's why they got Price.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he's going to be eating more touches. And then you've also got the switch with Trey Lance. I mean, just talking about the 49ers, I feel like we could spend an entire hour just talking about the 49ers. Yeah. There's so much to unpack here with Brandon Ayuk, who also saw a massive role shift around the mid-season point. Up until week 9, this guy never saw more than 90 snaps or 90% of the team snaps. And then from week 9 onward, he saw 90% plus in every single game. He finished as the wide receiver 16 over the second half of the season and was just killing it out there as the wide receiver. Well, Debo Samuel was playing running back. Elijah Mitchell was getting running back snaps. Now you got Trey Lance taking over. You don't know if they're going to throw more, if they're going to run more. Last year, Debo Samuel had the goal line running back role, which is just mind-blowing for a wide receiver to have. But now you got Trey Lance, who's arguably one of the best rushing quarterbacks in the league. He's going to be keeping that ball a lot at the goal line. So there's just way too much to unpack here. I didn't even mention George Kittle, who is now 100% healthy this offseason and who could be. I mean, there's just so many mouths to feed with a new inexperienced quarterback. I just can't really get on the Debo high-end wide receiver 1 train.
Do you think they ultimately move on? Do you think they do turn it over to Lance and trade Jimmy, or because they're kind of past Jimmy being able to possibly trade Jimmy right now because they're post camp or post draft? Do you think they're going to end up keeping him?
I've kind of been saying that since as soon as the season ended, that don't be surprised one bit if Jimmy Garoppolo is the quarterback. I mean, we heard all of the rumors at the time that, Kyle Shanahan really wanted to draft Mac Jones, that he kind of felt like his hand was forced into drafting Trey Lance. And Trey Lance looked good last year, but he didn't do anything spectacular. I mean, they schemed up plays to get guys wide open down the field, and he hit them in stride, which is great. But once you get tape on them and defenses are able to adjust, I don't know if that's going to work out long term. And we know that this team can win with Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo was injured last year and they still just kept pushing him out there rather than turning the keys over to Lance. So for whatever reason, Kyle Shanahan just loves Jimmy Garoppolo. And I'm favoring Trey Lance for sure, but I still think there's like a 30 or 40% chance that Jimmy G is the week 1 starter.
It's an interesting dichotomy you're talking about, and we could talk about the Niners forever because you talk about Shanahan just turning players over, and maybe Lynch is like, no, wait, we just gave up the farm for Trey Lance. And, like if you're Shanahan, you're like CJ Beathard. It doesn't matter. I can put Nick Mullins in here and run the offense. It really doesn't matter. So that's an interesting thing to talk about there. Johnny, you're of these polarizing players we talked about, we list them out on that tweet there. Who do you have here as your most polarizing?
Oh, most polar. Well, I just think I'll do it. I'll say DK Metcalf because with DK I can actually it makes a whole lot of sense why there's such a vast range of where DK could actually land, because one, that there is at least some potential where DK could be just targeted like a target monster, right? We know Tyler Lockett is a fairly good wide receiver, but we also know that like Drew Lock isn't the most accurate, and who's going to be able to be a bigger target than DK Metcalf. And we saw that connection with Courtland Sutton, who is also on this list, but Courtland Sutton actually did have a top 12 season when he had Drew Lock as his quarterback. So that's why I do think DK, and you're going to get such a vast range always in even every league because of what people think of Seattle and who their quarterback is now. So I am really intrigued with DK Metcalf. I'm really hoping his value comes down, especially in Dynasty, because I've been trying to acquire him, and I know it's only a matter of time before he really ends up getting placed with a quarterback and a coach that will actually get him and make him a beast, but or return him to beast qualities there. So that would be mine, would be DK Metcalf.
Lastly here, I'm going to ask you, Dave, you were ranking with these guys. You wrote the tweet out. Which one had you raising your eyebrows the most here?
DK Metcalf, but we just talked about him at length. So I like everything Johnny said there, but I want to talk a little bit about Antonio Gibson, because this guy's finished now back-to-back seasons. He has been an RB1. So it is wild to see a running back coming off 2 straight seasons as an RB1 hitting year 3 and getting ranked as low as RB29. I mean, it's kind of weird to see that. This guy played last year on a, what was it, a
Splinter
broken
chin?
Yeah, he had something going on with his leg, and he just muscled through it and just kept playing. And there are a lot of reasons to be concerned. You know, they brought back J.D. McKissick. They drafted Brian Robinson. We're concerned about what this offense is going to look like with Carson Wentz, but is Carson Wentz really that big of a step down from Taylor Heineke and Dwayne Haskins and whoever they've had for the last couple of years? I don't think so. So I think that people have overcorrected on Antonio Gibson. I keep my DMs open on Twitter, and people DM me every single day asking for advice. And I get this DM almost once a day where somebody says, should I trade Antonio Gibson away for a second-round rookie pick? And every single time I tell people no. His value is so low right now, it just isn't worth it. I mean, this guy, even if he does see a little dip in volume last year, he's extremely efficient. He's a great runner. I think his floor is about RB20, and we know because we've seen it in 2 straight seasons that he's got an RB1 ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, we got a lot of Gibson. Austin's a huge Gibson fan here. I love Gibson coming out. I just wonder if Washington loves Gibson at this point after everything they've said and done and the lack of passing game work when he was a converted wide receiver. It's a little bit scary there for sure.
And people are so reactive to news this time of year. Did you see Rivera's quote about I want to turn them into D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart? And then immediately you check keep trade cut. And just that day, poof, his value just plummeted because people saw one bit of news in May. So for all the people out there rostering Antonio Gibson in your dynasty leagues or thinking about drafting him this year, just take a deep breath.
Hey, in the offseason, if you're not overreacting, are you even reacting?
Right.
And Gibson reminded me of the play. You know, it was the Kenyon Drake kind of persona of 2 years ago, right? Where he finishes the end of the season, ends up being, you know, a top 10 running back. Next year, people are like, I don't know if I buy in, whatever. He ends up, you know, you draft him somewhat high. He ends up not necessarily disappointing in the end of the year. He finished as a top 14 running back where his ADP was, you know, but because he didn't have those explosive mega, you know, where people thought that they could get, then, you know, the next following year they were majorly.
Yeah, why wasn't Gibson just super explosive on his almost exploded shin last year? You know, how come he wasn't just absolutely dynamic? Yeah, no, I feel that. Dave, really quickly before we end the show, because we've already kept you a little bit longer here, I wanted to ask you, because I really think this question unlocks, and maybe not so much for his fantasy value and Zach Wilson, but Zach Wilson being good or not unlocks so much in fantasy for me. We've seen the Jets load up on offense. If you look at Dynasty, we're talking about Breece Hall. We're talking about Garrett Wilson. You know, we saw Elijah Moore break out last year. We saw Michael Carter do good things last year.
Braxton Berrios, baby.
Braxton Berrios. We were talking a little bit about him. Is Zach Wilson good or not, Dave? Because I need to know for my Jets fantasy investment.
I really don't think Zach Wilson's that good. That being said, I didn't like what I saw from him last year. That being said, they're doing exactly what you want to see a team do around a young quarterback, just surrounding him with talent, bringing in Breece Hall, bringing in Garrett Wilson. So he's a guy that I find myself drafting a lot of. I actually just checked earlier today, and he's my 3rd most rostered quarterback in best ball right now. Not because I'm in love with Zach Wilson. No, just because his ceiling is so high. I mean, this guy's a great athlete, and he is surrounded by phenomenal weapons. I mean, the ceiling is there that he could crack into that elite tier of quarterback this year. The scary thing is that his floor is what we saw last year. What did he finish as? QB 29, QB 30 or something like that? I mean, he stunk last year, and there's a good chance that he just stinks again this year. But as far as just, you know, a good bet in a 2 QB or a super flex or a best ball league, whatever it may be, I do like his ceiling. So I find myself drafting him, even though I'm not a big believer in his talent.
Love it, love it, love it. We'll see what we get out of the Jets. One of an interesting case studies for me, and I think for everybody, just looking at all these different, you know, things that are going on with the Jets. They're building the right way, like you said, which is probably, I don't mean to take shots at your boy Justin Fields, but it's not something Chicago's doing right now, right? Like they're doing the opposite. And, you know, that maybe that does something actually, you know, for whoever comes in after Wilson. If they move on from Wilson fast because they've built the team around it, maybe we can trust in Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson Wilson and Elijah Moore and these guys because
Yeah, I mean, would there be a more alluring spot for a potential quarterback? You know,
Right, and
Jimmy G, Baker Mayfield gets to go to play in New York and have all these phenomenal
Well,
weapons.
what if an elite quarterback gets disgruntled? Russell Wilson. What if, we saw Deshaun Watson get moved in this offseason? Like, it can happen now. And I think that's why it's smart to build around your guy, because even if he's not the guy, your team's ready to drop a quarterback in and potentially be that team, essentially. Well, we dropped Dave in onto the show today, and we had a great time. It was just been a blast, Dave. We really appreciate you coming on here. Obviously, you're taking a little bit of a content break, but where can the people, find some of your evergreen stuff that you've been working on all this time? Obviously, Twitter and all that. Tell them where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge. That's Dave, Kluge. And then you can find all of my written and video content at footballguys.com and youtube.com/footballguys. I got 3 shows a week that I'm doing out there now. I've got my weekly short video that I'm doing on Wednesday afternoons, Wednesday evenings. I've got the mailbag show. And then Friday afternoons, I've got the launch pad coming out. I got 2 guests on there every single week. Actually, just recorded this week's episode, and it's a really, really fun one with JJ Zacharyson and Alex Caruso. What I did is I took situations where teammates have similar ADPs and then compare them and see who we like better at value. So we talk about Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. We talk about Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. We go through and have a lot of really fun conversations. So that comes out tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern, if anyone wants to check that out.
Nice.
Yeah, we'll definitely be checking it out.
Nice
Well,
to meet
thank
you,
you,
Jersey
Dave. Yeah, love it. Thank you, Dave. Thanks to Whisper Nation, Jersey J, Dave, Scott, everybody that was in there. We appreciate
Slim Reaper.
Yeah, Freak Stomper. Appreciate all you guys. For Johnny Game Time Hicks, for Austin Sear, for Dave, I'm Big Travy. We're the Fantasy Whispers. We're out. Peace.
Peace.
Right here.
Look at you go. You made it to the end of another one of our videos. Hey, if you still have some questions, I totally understand. Or you just want to join an awesome fantasy football community, head on over to our Discord chat. Link is in the description below. And if you're still not sold on us, check out one of these videos.